it feels a lot worse to lose $100 than it does to gain $100. So in psychology, what they call that is loss aversion. And in our heads, what we do is we usually inflate the potential loss or consequences by 2 to 7 times. So whenever we're thinking about doing something, we inflate the potential consequences way more than what reality shows. So how do you actually overcome that? Well, you start by making small tests. You start by trying little things that involve a small amount of risk. In order to build confidence, you always have to exercise commitment and courage. So you do that in small ways first, small tests. Maybe ask that girl on a date or try something small and realize that you can handle it, you can recover. Kevin Kelly, the famous writer, said that pros are really just amateurs who know how to gracefully recover from their mistakes. That's the key, is knowing that whatever the situation is going to bring, you're going to be able to recover. There's another concept that's connected with confidence. It's called identity capital. And identity capital is the idea that you have ownership over your past. If you've watched yourself overcome bad situations or overcome obstacles or challenges, you can use that capital. You have ownership over that. If you've watched yourself do something hard, this is why for most people, most millionaires are first generation rich, is because they come from a bad situation and they were able to grow out of that. They were able to watch themselves do hard things. They were able to realize that in bad situations, they could still get out of it. So one of the ways to build confidence is by making small bets in yourself, by actually trying something that involves some form of risk. And that's actually really the psychological definition of courage, is pursuing a worthwhile goal that involves some form of risk. It's something you do intentionally. You're intentionally pursuing a goal that involves some form of risk. And Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, the #1 entrepreneurial coach in the world, said that there really are 4 C's to confidence. The first one is commitment, meaning that you commit to some outcome, and following that commitment comes courage. You take that risk, you try that thing, you're willing to face the downside. And then through taking that risk, through exercising that courage, you build capability. You build capabilities of learning new skills, learning how to handle uncertainty, and ultimately that's what builds confidence. In professional sports, for example, basketball, those with the most confidence are the ones who are willing to take the final shot. They're the ones who are willing to lose, and they're willing to take the consequences of losing. They're willing to take that final shot and miss. Most people, they don't want that final shot because if they miss, they don't want to have to deal with the repercussions. Whereas those with extreme confidence, they're willing to take the repercussions of failure because they realize in reality that the repercussions aren't that big. If you miss that shot, yes, you might have lost the game. Yes, you may have even lost the championship, but there's always another opportunity and you can always learn from that. And people who miss that last shot, they don't use that as the basis for taking the next shot. They're still willing to take the next one and the next one and the next one. And for them, it's actually more risky to not take the shot, to have always wondered what if. So that's the first key, is realizing that the costs or the consequences are a lot smaller than you imagine them to be. It's fears that you're projecting. It's extreme fears that you're projecting onto situations. I remember, for example, when I first started blogging online, I was worried about what people thought of me. I was terrified of throwing my opinions out on the internet because what would people from high school think of me, or what would this person or that person think on my Facebook feed? I realized in throwing it out there that no one even really cared, and that I can't control other people's opinions, and honestly, other people's opinions shouldn't matter to me. Other people's opinions are none of my business. And so you gain a lot of confidence when you realize that first off, the consequences aren't gonna be as big as you think they are, probably not as big as you think they are, but second off, on the other side, you can learn a lot through failures. And that's actually, again, what Kevin Kelly said, is pros are amateurs who learn how to gracefully respond to their failures. That's actually another one of the keys to building confidence, is getting into difficult situations, making mistakes, but then learning to recover from them quickly. When you make a mistake, rather than avoiding it or being sad or upset, and that's often the reaction is to withdraw, to escape, to run away. But if you can just fully face the situation and frame it in a positive way. Rather than saying, why is this happening to me? If you framed it as, this is happening for me. This is exactly what I need. I'm the one who's attracting the situation into my life. You've attracted the situation, you've created the situation. So if you can immediately take full ownership for it and frame the situation as, this is exactly what I need. This is exactly what's gonna give me the skills, the tools to move forward. Then you can quickly recover from your mistakes. And if you watch yourself recover from mistakes and get yourself out of bad situations, then you'll realize you can get out of worse and worse situations, which will give you the confidence to take on bigger and bigger risks, or to try things that may be terrifying to you, but aren't that big a deal. Now, all of this actually embodies a really cool concept in psychology. It's called psychological flexibility. There's a growing body of research on this concept of psychological flexibility. And really what it is it's the ability to handle uncertainty. It's the ability to be flexible to your emotions when you're stepping into a situation of uncertainty, when you're trying something new, when you're trying something that might not work. And that's, again, really what courage is it's the willingness to try something that might not work. When you're out of your comfort zone, when you're trying something new, you can become flexible to your emotions. Rather than being defined by your emotions, rather than being driven by your emotions, you can learn to frame them in a positive way. You can use stress as a positive, but ultimately you can become flexible to being outside your comfort zone. And when you're flexible outside your comfort zone and you learn how to regulate your emotions, meaning when you're stressed, you learn how to quickly handle them. You plot your journal, you write down what's going on, you get it on paper so that you can see it more objectively. You get help from people, you ask people help, you get other people's opinions, and ultimately, you quickly make informed actions. There's actually a quote from Tom Bilyeu that I love. He said it's better to go 1,000 miles an hour in the wrong direction than not moving at all. Because if you're going 1,000 miles an hour in the wrong direction, at least you're getting really fast feedback. And with fast feedback, you can actually recover, you can adjust, you can go forward. It's that whole idea of massive action with constant correction. Airplanes, for example, are always getting pushed off course. Most airplanes on a flight across the country, they're nudged off course constantly. I think that it says that airplanes are off course like 90% of the time, but they have that inertial guidance system that's constantly course correcting them. The problem is even if you're off course by 1 degree, but you don't correct course for like a year or a decade, then it gets unfathomable to try to correct it. But if you're off course, but you're constantly correcting through your own intuition, through journaling, through clarifying your vision, through connecting with your future self, through getting increasingly high quality help from mentors, friends, and people, then it doesn't matter how many mistakes you make. What matters is moving on from those mistakes. Another powerful way to build confidence is, first off, as I've already talked about, knowing that the consequences for failure are probably not as bad as you think they are. But a second layer to that, which is even higher, is the belief in the knowledge that even if you lost it all, you would be completely fine. So Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback for the Clemson football team. Clemson University is the #1 football program in the world. And by the way, I got my PhD there. But Trevor Lawrence is an amazing quarterback. And he was interviewed once about what he thought of all the fame, because he's getting all this fame. He's probably going to be the Heisman Trophy winner this year. He's probably going to be the #1 draft pick in the NFL in the upcoming season. And he talked about his Christianity. He talked about his beliefs in Christ and about how, at the end of the day, his identity is not built on himself as a football player. So he doesn't really care about the opinions of other people. Even if he lost everything, if he broke his leg or something like that and had to quit football forever, his identity is built in his religious beliefs or in his faith in God or his faith in Christ. And so that gives him rock solid confidence that it doesn't really matter what people say about him, and his identity is not built on the one thing about himself which everyone admires. And that allows you to have a lot of confidence in any situation as well, is when your identity is not so built on what you're doing or on your situation. A lot of people, they put their identity into their career or into their finances, and when those things get lost, they have no identity left. There's a lot of reports of people, for example, who are billionaires who, when the market crashes and they lose their billions, they then commit suicide because their whole identity was that of being a billionaire. So beyond knowing about loss aversion, if you have a belief system, specifically in a higher power, for example, that allows your identity to be built on something so much bigger, then it really doesn't matter what happens in this life or what you have or don't have. Your identity is built on something so much more profound than your current circumstances or your current outcomes. Now, the final aspect of extreme confidence is extreme preparation. This is something that you learn from elite athletes, but also just people in general, people who are smart with their finances. Take COVID-19, for example. Those who were prepared financially in their career, they handled this situation a lot better. Jim Rohn, the famous writer and the famous author, said that you can't really avoid the winters of life. There are always going to be seasons. There's going to be winter, spring, summer, fall, and after the fall, which is where all the reaping happens, by the way, that's when the farmer reaps. It's during the fall. It's during the spring that you plant, the summer that you work, and it's during the fall that you're actually reaping all of your rewards as a farmer. But what always comes after all of the reaping? When the market's the highest, usually that's when there's some form of correction or failure. And those who are at their peak, there's another really good book I would recommend to you. It's called Peaks and Valleys. But basically what the author says is that for people who are on their peaks, bad things happen because of the foolish choices they make on their peaks. When things are going really well, usually people get complacent. They don't plan for the future. They overspend. But when you actually are smart during your peak, you prepare for the next winter because you know the winter's coming. You put money away. You actually build yourself up in multiple ways. You have good resources. Then with massive preparation, you don't need to fear. When you're fully prepared, and this is something that even LeBron James has said all the time. He's been asked many, many times, how do you deal with the stress of various situations? And he just says, I know that I've prepared more than anyone else. And so when the situation gets intense, I know I've got more to draw from. But on a more practical level, what would happen if when things crash or when things fall apart, what would happen if you had like $10,000 or $20,000 cash at home on hand because you had prepared for it? What would happen if over the last 10 years you'd been building up your security blanket, and you also had lots of resources and lots of friends and people who could help you if things fell apart? Security is a really important thing, and when you're really secure and safe, then you have the ability to take risks. That's actually what a lot of basketball players say. They say that when you have the security of knowing that your team's got your back, then you're willing to take risks. And that's true as well in normal relationships with family. If you have a sense of security and safety and protection, then you can be courageous to take those risks because you've got that safety net, you've got that protection. And so you can be increasingly confident and courageous and take on bigger and bigger opportunities or handle bigger situations when you've been preparing. And you should prepare always be preparing for winters and for unexpected challenges. If you're always preparing and increasing your preparedness, then you can take bigger and bigger risks, or you can handle bigger challenges. And you can know that even if things fall apart, you've got safety nets in powerful relationships, you've got knowledge, you've got capabilities. So that's how you build confidence. Confidence is the awareness that the situation isn't as bad as you think it's going to be, that whatever happens, you're going to be okay. It's also not placing your identity in yourself, in your circumstances, or in your outcomes. The final way to build increasing confidence in any situation is increasingly preparing yourself for when things inevitably will go wrong. Of this, Randy Pausch, the author of the book The Last Lecture, said this. He said, one thing that makes it possible to be an optimist is if you have a contingency plan for when all hell breaks loose. There are a lot of things I don't worry about because I have a plan in place if they do. That's the key, is that no matter where you're at right now, if you're on a peak or if you're in a valley, if you're in a spring, summer, fall, or if you're in the winter, prepare for the next one. Increasingly prepare yourself. As they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. If you had planted that tree 20 years ago, you wouldn't have probably had a lot of the problems you have right now. But you can handle that by learning and by investing right now, investing in your future self, putting plans in place, building strongholds around yourself, preparing yourself for when things will go wrong, and so that when they start falling apart, you can handle it. You don't have to be stressed. Actually, the final thought on this is that there's a lot of research that shows that the people, for example, college students, who are most prepared for tests, it's actually during the testing period that they're the least stressed. At the end of the semester during finals, that's usually when most students are binge drinking caffeine, binge eating sugar, being up all night, because they're so stressed because they hadn't prepared for the final. But the students who had actually prepared all semester, it's actually at the end of the semester, the testing period, that's the least stressful part because they were ready for it. It's actually the most enjoyable part because that's when they could put their knowledge to the test. And so when things fall apart, when things get difficult, you can have extreme confidence and take extreme courage, take bigger risks when everyone's bailing. We all know that when things are falling apart, that's when the greatest opportunities are for growth. And if you're prepared, if you've been smart, and if you've been preparing for it, then when things start to crumble and crash, you've got the biggest opportunities to take the biggest risks and take the biggest leaps because now you're prepared for it, mentally, psychologically, and situationally. That's how you build confidence. Motivation and confidence are two separate things. There's a lot of people with motivation and far fewer people who have true confidence. Motivation is what you need to actually get going, get started. But confidence actually comes after you've made progress, especially after you've completed something. And that's the primary way you build confidence, is actually completing things, keeping your own promises. You can do this in a multitude of ways. One is just, for example, telling yourself you're going to do something and doing it. Hitting that alarm and actually waking up when you said you would. But ultimately, the best way to complete projects is by finishing things. When you watch yourself complete something and follow through, you build more confidence. That's actually why CrossFit is such a smart approach to fitness, is because it's objective based. You've got an objective and then you finish it. And by finishing it, you watch yourself get good at finishing. A lot of people can start, but far fewer people can finish. It's difficult to start, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of books that are trained to help you start. There's a great book by James Clear called Atomic Habits. And really what a lot of the motivational literature is around is helping you make starting as easy as possible. It's all around focusing on making it so simple. You lower down the expectations so that starting is so simple. Rather than trying to do a huge workout with 100 push-ups, you just say, I'm just gonna do one push-up. There's even a book called Tiny Habits on the subject by BJ Fogg. BJ Fogg being the Stanford psychologist whose research is behind most of the habit development stuff. So yes, it's important to start, and making starting as simple as possible. But there's so much research, so much energy around starting, because the goal is that once you get started, then motivation kind of starts kicking in, then you start getting some momentum. But motivation is not the same as confidence. Confidence comes from having actually made progress. Confidence comes from watching yourself complete. Confidence comes from watching yourself follow through. So you don't have to have actually completed to make confidence. Let's just say your goal is right here and you've just started. Well, even if you're like 3 or 4 steps along the way, you've made progress. You can look back. You can measure your progress backwards. And by seeing that progress, you can have more confidence. Confidence then fuels your motivation, because the more confident you are, the more you believe you can actually succeed based on evidence from your prior performance. And that evidence gives you more motivation that you should keep going. The more confidence you have, the more motivation you will have. Motivation is the energy or the force that's behind your actions. Confidence is the belief that you can actually succeed and the belief that you can actually execute on the actions required to achieving your goals. The only way to truly build confidence is to follow through. You won't have confidence, you won't have self-trust if you continually lie to yourself. And so you give yourself little opportunities. You make little promises to yourself. You say, I'm going to wake up at this time. Boom. You say, I'm going to complete this project. Boom. Just last week, I actually decided to go on a run, a certain length of time. And I just said, I'm going to complete this because I just need to complete. You need to train yourself to complete projects or complete assignments that you give yourself. That's again why CrossFit's so cool. So you want to give yourself objectives. You want them to be measurable objectives, things you can actually measure, things that other people can measure. For example, I ran 12 miles. That's measurable. Other people could measure that. That's one thing that novice goal setters do is they set unachievable goals and they set immeasurable goals. You want your goals to be achievable and measurable. You want them to be actual outcomes. And then there are things that other people can see. Have your workout be outcome-based. Just lay out a workout. I'm gonna do these 4 workouts with 5 sets each, and then you complete it and you walk away. I'm gonna write this 1 page. Complete it, walk away. Get better and better at completing projects. Really simple is go to bed with no more than 3 desired goals for the day. If you've got 10 items on your to-do list, you've set yourself up for failure. That's also another concept called decision fatigue. If you have too many goals or too many targets, your brain's too scattered. I love the quote from Jim Collins in Good to Great, if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. Also, the 80-20 principle, which is 80% of your results come from 20% of what you want to do. You want to focus on being effective, not busy. So give yourself 1, 2, or 3 outcomes per day. Wake up and knock those things out. And the more you can knock out on a daily basis and watch yourself actually follow through, the more confidence you'll have to take on better and better projects. And the more confidence you have, the more motivation you'll have. The more motivation you'll have, the easier it becomes to just simply do the work required. And you get excited because you get excited by completing. You get to see the benefits, the results of completing projects. You get to become a finisher. Finishers are the people who actually are out there who have done work. They don't just have ideas in their head. They don't just have hopes and dreams for their future. They actually have tangible results in their past. There's a great quote from Tim Grover in his book, Winning. He says, losers have a to-do list, whereas winners have a done list. Winners have a done list. They have a list of things in their past where they can say, I've done all those things. I've completed all those projects. What can you look back on and say, I've done that. I've completed that. The list of things you've completed essentially represents your current level of confidence. You look back and say, I did that. I completed that. I actually followed through. That's the only way you can build your confidence, is to complete things. Complete your day well. Finish strong. Tell yourself you're going to put your phone on airplane mode with 30 minutes to bed and then turn it off. And actually just do what you say you're going to do. If you're going to try to eat well for 24 hours, eat well, follow through. The more opportunities you give yourself to follow through and to complete, the more confidence you'll build. The more confidence you have, the bigger your imagination will be towards your future self. You want an imagined, exciting future self. Albert Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. Confidence is the basis of imagination, and confidence is the fuel for a motivation. So the more confidence you have, the more imagination you have towards your future self, the more bigger and exciting the goals you'll be able to pursue, but also the more fuel you'll have behind that imagination, the more motivation you'll have. So confidence is essential. Confidence is powerful, but it's based on past performance. It's based on what you've actually achieved, based on what you've actually done. And so you've got to complete stuff. Give yourself little opportunities to get small wins. Even just making your bed. There's a great little book on the subject called Make Your Bed. Just make your bed. That's a completion. Make your bed. That creates momentum. And just keep completing. Complete. The more you complete, the more you finish, the more you'll be able to take on bigger things that you can then complete and finish. The reason people don't pursue big goals is because they really don't believe they'll ever truly finish it. They've watched themselves quit over and over and over again, and it's no good for your confidence to start a million projects but have them all be unfinished. Instead, I love the 80% rule by Dan Sullivan. He said 80% is better than 100% because 80% is actually getting results. 100% is still thinking about it. Rather than being a perfectionist and having no finished products or no finished projects, completed at 80%. 80% means it's out there. It's out in the world. It's done. Done is better than perfect. Get stuff done and then get better and better at being prolific and getting more and more stuff done. That's how you build confidence. Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, actually has a beautiful concept. He calls it the 4 C's formula. And he basically says that in order to actually create something new, you have to start by committing very specifically and very powerfully to something specific. So you have to commit to a specific result. So for example, if you're making $50,000 a year and you want to be making $100,000 a year, you have to first start by committing 100% to that new result. Clayton Christensen, the Harvard business professor, actually said that 100% commitment is a lot easier than 98% commitment, because if you're only 98% committed, then you've never actually truly made the decision. A true decision means you've cut off alternative options. It means you've actually committed in your mind that you're going to do this. So back to Dan Sullivan's 4 C's, first you commit 100% to a very specific result. It's a lot easier to commit to something specific than something broad. So for example, committing to being in shape is a lot harder than committing to running a marathon, because committing to running a marathon is actually something specific. It's something measurable. Also, dialing that down even more, you could commit to running a marathon in under 4 hours or in 3 hours and 30 minutes. Whatever you commit to specifically then shapes your process. That's what psychologists call deliberate practice. In order to actually be deliberate and practice towards something, you have to have a clear and specific measurable target, a future self that you're working towards, which is measurable. So as you commit to something specific, that leads you to the second C on Dan's formula, which is courage. Committing to anything above and beyond your current self leads to courage. Courage is acting above your current self. It's acting out of your comfort zone. Psychologists and neuroscientists have found that your brain is actually a prediction machine. Your brain forms memories to be able to predict the future. And if you're always living your life based on what's predictable in your future, then that means you're living based on your past self. You're living based on experience. There's a great quote from Paul Arden, and he said that creativity is more powerful than experience. And so if you're always living your life just based on past experience, then your future is going to be very predictable, and your brain is literally going to be predicting your future based on your memories. In neuroscience, a prediction error means that you actually tried something and what happened was different than you expected. Your prediction was wrong. And that prediction error is another word for learning. And so when you experience a prediction error, meaning you actually tried something, you had a new experience, and it wasn't what was expected, or it wasn't perfectly what was expected, then your brain literally immediately starts pruning and changing your memories to update them so that your brain now has a new view of reality. So what happens is once you've committed to something new and you start acting courageously towards your future self, you're going to be doing stuff outside your current frame of reference. You're going to be stepping out of your comfort zone. You're going to be trying new things. And courage is a difficult part of the process because you're living above and beyond your current self. You're actually trying to be at the level of your future self. But what's amazing is once you start living courageously and living intentionally, that's actually where you start having a lot of peak experiences. Actually experiencing a prediction error is a peak experience. Peak experiences are another word for learning. And the more peak experiences you have, the more evolved you'll become, because peak experiences make you what psychologists call flexible, psychologically flexible. The more psychologically flexible you are, the more you can handle your emotions, and also the more you can control your emotions rather than letting your emotions control you. Most people, they have a lot of emotional resistance towards their goals, which is why they don't actually achieve them. In order to actually achieve your goals, you have to be your goal first. And being is your thinking and your level of emotions. And so when you have a clear goal for your future self, whatever it may be, you have to then start being that person now, which means you got to start living courageously. And as you start living courageously, you're going to have a lot of peak experiences, which is going to make you increasingly flexible, which is going to enable you more and more to be able to handle the unknown, to be okay with not knowing all of the answers. But as you courageously pursuing your future self, and as you're learning new things through feedback, which is another aspect of deliberate practice, as you're learning new and better ways of doing things, because if you commit 100% to a result, then you will find the pathway to getting there. Albert Einstein said that insanity is trying the exact same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. No. If you commit to a new result, you're going to have to commit to a new process, which means you're going to have to find new and better ways of doing things. And that part of that is courageously trying and learning and actually figuring things out, getting feedback, learning new and better ways of doing things. And so as you're going through that second C, which is courage and learning, you then develop what Dan would call the third C, which is capability. Once you have the capabilities of your future self, then you will then have the fourth C, which is the confidence of your future self. And wherever you're at right now is based on your current level of confidence. Your current level of confidence then becomes the springboard for committing to new results. So whatever results you're getting right now is what you're committed to. If you want new results, you have to commit 100% to new and better results. And if you're committed 100% to something new, that's going to force you to change what you do, because what got you here won't get you there. But you absolutely can commit 100% to your future self. You just have to commit to certain results. In philosophy, they call it teleology. According to teleology, all behavior is driven by goals. Every behavior you do, even you watching this video, is driven by a goal. You clicked on this video maybe because you were triggered to, but you still clicked on it for a reason. You might have just wanted to know what it was about. If you go to the grocery store, you're going to the grocery store to achieve a goal, to get groceries. If you go to work, you're going to work to achieve a goal. It could be to get a paycheck. It could be to learn something, to do a passion. Everything you do is driven by an outcome that you're seeking. Even just looking at your phone, it could be just to get dopamine. Honestly, it could be to see what's on Facebook. Everything you do is driven by the future you're creating, the future you see for yourself, the future you're most committed to. That's why all results are based on commitment. And whatever you're committed to is based on the future you see for yourself. And so in order to change your results, you actually have to change the future you're committed to. You have to change the future you see for yourself. You have to change the future self that you're going to commit to. And then once you change what you want and what you're committed to, then you'll have to change who you're being right now, because you have to be in order to do and do in order to have. So you then have to start being your future self now, which feels courageous in the moment. It feels courageous to actually behave at the level of your future self, or to try at the level of your future self, to deliberate practice at the level of your future self, to fail at the level of your future self. There's a great story, actually. I forget his name. He's a real estate agent in New York. I think his last name is Sir Hunt. And he talked about how when he moved to New York, he was focused on getting people literally rent. So he was an agent, real estate agent, and he would work with people trying to get them an apartment. And he would get people like $1,000 rent apartments, and he'd get like $100 commission. And then one day he got a phone call from someone who said that they wanted a $2 million condo. This was way above and beyond what he believed for himself. It was way above his self-image. It was way above his current commitment, way above his current confidence. But he decided to go for it fully, and so he committed at the level of his future self. This was his moment of change, because he decided he was going to commit and try at the level of his future self, and even failed at the level of his future self. And so he then actually rented a limousine. He looked up all of the apartments that were at that level. And he bought a new suit. He started actually being at the level of his future self and trying at the level of his future self, and even, becoming radically ignorant at the level of his future self, because his current self didn't know much better. But anyways, he ended up getting the sale. But the point was that he was practicing at the level of his future self. He was trying at the level of his future self, because he then became committed at the level of his future self. And once he actually was trying, he was having all sorts of peak experiences, because he saw himself doing stuff he'd never done before. He was actually like putting himself in situations and environments. He was trying things. He was learning things way outside his current bubble. And so he was becoming far more conscious. So you've got to commit if you want to get new results, because whatever results you're getting are based on what you're committed to. And you got to commit to certain results, and then from there, you reverse engineer a process. And reverse engineering the process means you actually deliberate practice forward. You try, you fail, you get feedback, you adjust your process, and you figure out the way. That's why they say when the why is strong enough, you'll find the how. I would also add you will find the who's, because often it's actually getting who's. There's the great quote that basically says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. When the student becomes committed, they become committed enough to find teachers to learn or people to partner with. And so often it's actually who, not how. But in any case, there is a pathway to getting where you want to go. Often the who is the how to getting where you want to go. So your level of results are based on what you're committed to. If you want to actually get better results, you have to commit 100% to new and different results, and then that takes you through Dan's 4C cycle, which basically takes you through the deliberate practice process. And once you deliberately practice at the level of your future self, you then develop skills and capabilities of your future self, and it then just becomes your new normal. Hope that helps. I invite you to commit very specifically to results you want. And then from there, you're going to have to start being your future self now. You're going to have to start doing things that your future self would do and learning new and better processes, because what got you here won't get you there. And your current process, your current habits, your current identity is creating the results of your current self. And so if you want to actually create at the level of your future self, you got to actually create the identity of your future self, because your behavior comes from your identity. And so you want to start at the level of your future self. There's a lot of research that shows that optimistic people live on average 10 years or more longer than pessimistic people. And one of the most powerful tools or strategies that you can use to become optimistic is to imagine your best possible self, or your desired future self. What psychologists invite people to do, and I'm going to invite you to do it in this video. And by the way, this is going to be a part of a future self series course that's going to be here on this YouTube channel, and you can watch it. There's going to be 30 videos that are going to be breaking down all of the best research to help you become your best self, your desired future self. But what psychologists recommend you do is you think about your best possible self 5 to 10 years into the future. You can choose the timeline, 5 to 10 years, but literally take the time to sit and then write who you want your future self to be. Write down all the key attributes you want to have. And if you give yourself 10 to 15 minutes to just do this, sit down, you could choose 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and just list out who your future self is, who your best possible self is. What this activity has been found to do is boost your optimism. Now, there's a lot of obvious reasons why. First off, your view of your future is the thing that determines how you feel in the present. It's two things. Your view of the future and also your view of the past largely shape how you feel in the present. If you have a compelling and exciting future, Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, he talks a lot about how you need hope and purpose towards your future, or else the present becomes really painful. Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, actually says the only way to make your present better is by making your future bigger. And that's exactly what Viktor Frankl found. Viktor Frankl was living through the concentration camps. He was one of the Jews in World War II, and he wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about how what man needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal. He also says that life is never unbearable by circumstance, but by having a loss of meaning and purpose. So what Frankl found was that when people in the concentration camps lost hope in their future, they died. And so one of the reasons why this activity is so powerful about defining your best possible self, your future self, is it gives you a clear view of your future, which then allows you to feel good about the present, and it gives your life direction, and it gives it purpose and meaning. So that is crucial. That is powerful. There's also something I want you to know. There's a lot of research from the psychologist, Dr. Carol Dweck. She was a Stanford psychologist. She's the one who coined the terms growth mindset and fixed mindset. And what she found is that people with a growth mindset, they're very clear on their future self. They're clear on who they want to be, and they're more defined by their future self than they are by their current self. Whereas people with a fixed mindset, they're defined by where they're at right now. They don't actually believe that their future self is going to be any different, and so they wouldn't actually do this activity of defining their best possible self, because they think that who they are right now is who they're going to always be. That's the idea of a fixed mindset. You think your characteristics are permanent, your personality is permanent, your skills are permanent. Fixed mindset people are victims to their current self, and they overly identify their current self, and they also are the kinds of people who would want things like a personality test to tell them who they are. Really, what a fixed mindset is about is it's about overly identifying with your current self. It's about thinking who you are is who you're going to always be. And the truth of the matter, and there's a lot of research on this, particularly from Daniel Gilbert from Harvard, is that your future self is going to be a lot different than you expect them to be. Your future self is going to have different knowledge, different experiences. They're going to have different priorities, different values, different goals than you have right now. They're going to see the world differently than you. Just like if you really were to think about it, chances are you see the world differently than your former self. Think about who you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Chances are you have different goals, different beliefs, different priorities, different attitudes and habits, especially if you're someone who's very growth oriented. So the key point here is don't put too much stock in your current self. You should love and appreciate where you're at right now. And you can really do that, especially by taking the time to reflect on who you were in the past and appreciating the growth and the progress you've made right now. Really enjoying and embracing and appreciating your own progress is key to feeling happy, feeling appreciative right now. There's one other key aspect I'll just give you right here. When it comes to framing your past, you want to frame everything in what Dan Sullivan would call a gain rather than a gap. A lot of people, they view their past as something negative, But you can view every experience as a gain, even trauma experiences, even hard experiences. If you choose to view it as this is something I can use to make my future better, then you can choose to have a positive past. And what you need to realize is the past is just a meaning. It's literally just a meaning. You're gonna change how you feel about certain things in the future. And so whatever the event was that occurred, it's not the event that matters, it's the meaning you give to the event. You can choose a positive or a negative meaning. Just as an example, my father was a drug addict when I was growing up. And I can choose to be in the gap about that. And when you're in the gap, you're comparing what is to some ideal which you wish it was. So if I'm in the gap, then I'm saying, why wasn't my past better? Why couldn't it have been what I wanted it to be? Why did my dad have to be a drug addict? My other friends didn't have drug addicts for dads. That's called being in the gap. You're always comparing what is to some non-existent ideal. Just as another example, I take my kids to Disneyland. We give them a cookie, and one of my kids is like complaining because his cookie is smaller than the other kid's cookie. That's the gap. That's measuring yourself and what you have against either someone else or some ideal in your head that doesn't exist. So when it comes to your past, you want to be in the gain. You want to frame it as, what can I have because of this? And you can choose to frame anything as a gain. You go to the gym and you're working out, you're gaining progress. You're better now because of what you're doing. You look at the past, even your hardest experiences. What are the benefits that came from that? What are the good that can come from that? Or what do you now know that will empower you in the future so you don't have to repeat that? Lessons are repeated until learned. And so ultimately you want a past that you appreciate, even the hard aspects of it, because you've given it a good meaning, a gain meaning. And you can appreciate the past, but you're anticipating an exciting future. So one other thing I'll give you on this, after you've imagined your best future self, what I want you to do is I want you to imagine having a conversation between your best future self and your former self. Think if they had a conversation, and you could do this in your journal if you want, or you could just do it in your imagination, but what would your best future self, first off, what would they say to you right now? Chances are, if you were to have a conversation with your best possible future self 5 or 10 years from now, and let's just say that they've accomplished all the goals that you want to accomplish, what would they say to you right now if you were to go and have lunch with them? You can even imagine meeting them anywhere. You could think of a great environment or a great location that would be meaningful, but think of a great spot and imagine yourself going and having a meal, or even just sitting by a really cool fireplace or whatever, sitting and talking to your future self. What would they tell you right now? That would be something to journal about. Chances are they would tell you that you're going to be successful. They would tell you that you don't need to have as much fear or worry or concern that you probably have, that you should move forward. I mean, only you know what they would tell you. But if you take the time to sit and reflect on that and think about the conversation that your future self would have for you, then you could start to get a lot of clarity about what you should do right now. Stephen Covey actually talks about imagining your 80th birthday party and the type of person you want to be and the impact you want to have on people and the legacy you've left. That's kind of a begin with end in mind thinking. You can allow your future self or your best possible self to ultimately give you the path of where you need to go from here to where you want to go. And that's going to obviously boost your motivation. According to the expectancy theory of motivation, there's 3 aspects of motivation. One is you have to have a clear and compelling goal. The second is you have to have a path to getting there. And the third is you've got to build the confidence that you can actually do it. And so by having a conversation with your future self, by getting clear on what you need to do, you can then start to develop that path, which gives you enhanced motivation. Another thing you can do is to imagine your future self going back in time essentially and talking with your former self. Maybe think about some aspect of your life when it was very challenging, very difficult. It might have been a very hard or a dark or a rough period of your life. What would your best self, your best future self, say to your former self? Or even what would you say to your former self if you could go back there right now and talk to them? Because you are the future self of your former self. And it's really important to be compassionate towards your former self. Really important to not regret your former self's decisions. There's no point in regretting the past. That's being in the gap. That's measuring yourself against what you wish it was versus appreciating where you are now versus where you were in the past. You're not the same person you used to be. So that is the activity I recommend you have. On this Future Self series, I'm going to teach you how to clarify, define your future self, and then ultimately I'm going to give you the most powerful strategies you can have to ultimately becoming your future self fast, because your future self has a different identity than you do. Your identity is how you see and describe yourself. It's how you define yourself. And ultimately what you want to do is you want to clarify your best future self. And then you want to embody that identity here and now. There's a concept you have to be before you can do and do before you can have. And so ultimately you want to be, then do, then have. And that happens when you start to identify with your future self. You start to talk like your future self. You start to ultimately behave in the ways that you want to so that you can start producing the results you want. Once you start being the person you want to be and doing what they would do, then you can have what your future self would have, whatever that may be. It could be a situation, it could be money, it could be relationships, it could be whatever you want. You just have to get clear on the result you want, and then ultimately you need to begin identifying as that person. In the book, The Inner Game of Tennis, the author talks about how giving too many oral instructions actually makes it hard for someone to get good at tennis. If a coach is constantly telling a tennis player, do this, 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 and this, they'll be overly focusing on what they'll do, and it'll actually make their performance worse. High performance is about visualizing the outcome you want and then literally turning off, letting your body do the job. So in that book, he talks about how we have two selves, self one and self two. Self one is your conscious mind, and self two is your unconscious. And from psychological research, we all know that high performance actually happens when you turn off your conscious mind and your subconscious takes over. This is when, like, a basketball player gets in amazing rhythm and they're completely in the zone. You hear the terms, he's out of his mind. He or she is performing way outside their conscious attention. The purpose of self one is to give the vision, to visually see with vividness the outcome you want. It could be that perfect golf swing. It could be you running a 5-minute mile. It could be you having a finished book. The goal of self one is to visualize and focus on the outcome. Albert Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Your self one, which is your conscious mind, is just to point the attention and the direction, not to overly control the process. Once you've visualized what you want, you actually just let go and you let self two go organically. You visualize what you want the swing to look like or where you want the ball to go when it comes to tennis, and then you just let your body do it. Your physical body actually is your subconscious mind. There's a great spiritual quote that says, when the spirit yields to the body, it becomes corrupt. But when the body yields to the spirit, it becomes pure and holy. Well, you can apply this quote to high performance. Self one is your conscious mind, or you could say your spirit. It says where to go. You need to consciously think about and intentionally visualize your future self, or where you want to go. And then your body can yield to your spirit, or your body can yield to your mind. You let the body flow. You let the subconscious do the work. High performance happens when you're not trying to overly control the process. Willpower is the worst way to change behavior. It's the worst way to change habits. If you just visualize and focus your attention on what you want, and then let the body just do its thing, the body will perform perfectly. It could be literally anything. It could be writing an article, writing a paper, acing a test. You focus on the outcome. What you focus on expands. You set the target, and then you just go through the process, and you trust the process. I actually recently did this today with running. I have a running coach, and he told me he wanted me to run 2 miles at a 7-minute pace. So all I did was think about the actual mileage, and then I just let my body run. I didn't try to overly control how my body ran. I wasn't consciously trying to correct my own form. My body is all it needs is the target. Once it has the target, you just let it go, and you actually try to shut down self one while you're performing. This is how you get unattached to the outcome. This is how you get unattached and how you can click into optimal and high performance. You set the target, and then you actually try to just quiet self one and just let yourself organically flow. You don't try to overly control the process. You actually just get better and better at visualizing the outcome that you want, focusing on the outcome, putting your target on the outcome, and then letting your subconscious, your self two, get you there. It's that easy. And this is literally the basis of books like Think and Grow Rich, where you just think about the amount of money you want. Even Thomas Edison said, never go to bed without a request to your subconscious. You visualize the outcome, you make it deep, you make it compelling, you make it clear, then you let your subconscious actually just do it for you. When you say what you want out loud and when you clarify the outcome, then you can get it. And you just see it. You see it more and more in your mind. Again, Albert Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. All your conscious mind has to do is think about the outcome. Once you've actually done some form of performance, you can use your conscious mind to analyze that performance. So think of, for example, Tom Brady. Tom Brady would watch himself on film and he would analyze it, he would dissect it, he would think about it, he would learn from it. He also maybe would watch other quarterbacks and kind of study it. So you can use your conscious mind to study. This would be called deliberate practice. And then you could integrate what you learn, and then you can use your learning to set a clear and a better target. And so that's really the purpose of learning. There's a great quote that basically says, intelligence is the ability to make finer distinctions. Finer distinctions means that you can clarify even further and further, finer grades, what you want to see, that perfect swing, or your net worth, or you making that business, or you connecting with a loved one, or just you having a good day. You need to visualize in vividness what that looks like, and then you get better and better at just letting yourself too, which is your subconscious, actually get you there. And it will get there in the easiest, most natural, most organic, most effortless way. If the conscious mind is trying to over-control how you do it, then you're going to try to exert too much effort, too much control, and that's going to stymie the process. That's not the purpose of your conscious mind. Your purpose of your conscious mind is to set the target and get better and better at setting clear targets by analyzing your performance or just learning in general and setting better targets, letting go, performing without any attachment to how you do. You may have a bad day. You may write a horrible paper. You may fail, but the goal is that you're constantly analyzing your behavior, analyzing your performance, better clarifying the outcome, and also measuring backwards. Measuring backwards is an important key to building confidence. Failing forward and measuring backwards is a great quote. You fail yourself forward towards your future self or towards the vision you have, but you measure yourself backwards against where you were before. Dan Sullivan, the co-founder of Strategic Coach, would call this measuring the gain, not the gap. You measure the gains. You actually take time to reflect and analyze back. Where are you now and how is your performance? It could be on that golf swing or that tennis swing, or it could be on your running times, or it could be on your income. It could be on anything. But you measure yourself backwards against where you were before. The British philosopher Alain de Botton said, if you're not embarrassed by who you were 12 months ago, you didn't learn enough. So as you're setting clear targets, as you're analyzing your behavior, and as you're integrating your learning and then setting better targets, and as you're getting better and better at letting go of controlling the process, but you're getting better at subconsciously tapping into high performance, and then you measure yourself backwards against where you were before, you will see that you're getting better. You will see that your measurables or your actual performance or your actual results are getting better and better because you're getting better at putting the spotlight on where you want to go. Wherever your eyes go, the body follows. Wherever your eyes go, your life follows. Whatever you focus on expands. Wherever your attention is, that's where you're going. And they've even looked at this, like for example, in NASCAR. When a car driver is going like 200 miles an hour, is all they have to do is just put their eye and attention just a little bit further, and the car goes wherever their eye is. And so you've got to just get better at controlling where your eye is going. That's your attention, the eye of your attention. You get to determine what your target is and how specific and clear that target is. And then you get to take your learning and your experience and filter it out and clarify, make finer distinctions about what you want, and you get better and better at letting go, having high performance moments where you're actually practicing or working towards that target. It could be a writing session where you just write 500 words after you've kind of set the intention for what those words would be. Or on a running session when you just say, I'm gonna run 3 miles at this pace. And then you just let it go. Try not to overcomplicate the process. Don't be attached to the outcome. And then you analyze what happened and you use that to set a better target. And then you get better and better at practicing and measuring backwards against where you were before. And as you measure backwards and as you see your own progress, you're going to build enormous confidence, because if you apply these principles of setting clear targets, turning off self-one, which is your conscious mind, while you're performing, and performing at a subconscious level, which is an effortless, high-performance, organic level, your body will know what to do. Your body will know where to take you if you visualized what it looks like. Even what your body looks like. If you visualize, for example, what your physical body looks like, and then as you're exercising, just see that image, your body will literally construct its muscles based on what you visually see. The physical body, or the self too, the subconscious mind, is powerful. And the more you can perform at a subconscious level, the more high performance you'll have, the faster you'll get there. Getting to elite levels in any form of performance isn't about consciously controlling everything. It's about setting the vision and then letting the subconscious do the job for you, and then analyzing your behavior, integrating your learning, and setting clear targets, and making your body will even make the needed adjustments if you just better see, for example, what it looks like. You see what that perfect run stroke looks like, or what you want your run stroke to look like. You see it in your mind, and then you let it go, and your body will just follow. Your body is brilliant at following instructions, or your subconscious is brilliant at actually creating the outcomes you want. There's a great quote from Joseph Murray, who wrote the book, The Power of the Subconscious Mind. He said, whatever is impressed on the subconscious mind will be expressed in the external world. Whatever you see, whatever you imagine, whatever you're thinking about and focusing on and creating, whatever you're impressing on your subconscious mind will be expressed. Your subconscious creates in the most easy, effortless, and organic ways whatever it is you're thinking about or creating. And so your responsibility with yourself, one, or your conscious mind, is to get better and better at intentionally thinking about what you want, thinking about and visualizing who you want to be, the outcomes you want to have, the situations you want to have. I love this book, The Inner Game of Tennis. It's all about learning and transforming your life. And it's the easy, effortless, unconscious way of doing it, not the overly controlling willpower approach. That is a hard, slow manner of change. So you can perform at a high level, and you can and should practice every single day. Whatever it is you're trying to do, it could be you at work, it could be you at home, it could be you at fitness. Whatever it is, take time to practice, visualize the outcome, maybe even write it down in a journal, and then just effortlessly trust that you're doing it. See in your mind the outcome, and then just let go and let your body perform. Perform in that speech, or perform in that presentation, or perform in that run, or perform in that soccer practice, whatever it is you're doing, or perform when you're with your family. You know, perform connecting with your child. You could imagine going home and just having an amazing connection with your child, or just having a great day, feeling good, having an awesome phone call. Maybe you need to have a very important phone call. See it in your mind, visualize what that looks like, and then just let go, and just don't overly try to control the process. In this video, I'm going to review a small book by Dan Sullivan called Always Be the Buyer. Down below are links to the book. You can get it on Amazon, or you can get it on the Strategic Coach website for free. All you got to do is put your email in and a little information. So Always Be the Buyer is a really great philosophy. It's a mind-blowing and exciting philosophy. Basically, the premise is this. In every situation, there are buyers and sellers. The seller is someone who can get rejected. The seller is trying to sell something, and the buyer can determine if they want it or not. The buyer is the one who ultimately does the rejecting. So as an example, if someone's trying to sell you a car, if you're the buyer, you can say no. You get to choose which car you buy, and you can reject all of the other sellers. And a core premise of this book is the idea that how you got to where you are right now is that you rejected a lot of the things that you used to say yes to. You rejected a lot of the things that you used to accept. And sometimes even getting rejected hard. Sometimes you get rejected. And often getting rejected hard can sometimes help you clarify what you want so that you can buy better things in the future. But a great first question is this. What are the things that you rejected, whether they be ideas, mindsets, philosophies, relationships, situations? What are the things you rejected and started saying no to and stopped accepting that you used to accept? And what were the most important rejections you've made? Again, it could be an idea. Once I rejected the idea that I wanted to be an employee. I rejected that idea. I accepted the idea that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. At one point, I rejected answering my own emails, and I hired an assistant to do that. I've recently rejected a lot of relationships that I used to want. I rejected a mentorship or a collaboration that no longer made sense to me because I no longer resonated with that person. I've recently rejected working with my old literary agent, and I'm rejecting working with my former publisher. And so even in the last 3 months, I've started rejecting a lot of things so that I can say yes to better things, so that I can buy better things. And so the point is that everything in your life should be happening for you, not to you. You should be learning from your former experiences. And as you start saying no to increasingly high quality things, you can start saying yes to better and better things. The point of all of this is that you should be the buyer. You should be the one that determines what you say yes to. And ultimately, as you improve your life, as you increase your results, as you increase your knowledge, your skills, your capability, you'll have the capacity to say yes to better things and no to less important things. You'll be able to courageously say no to things that your former self maybe would have said yes to. Just as an example with me with my old literary agent. I was not resonant with that relationship for over a year before I finally just said, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. My former self was holding on to it and trying to make it work when inside I knew that I no longer wanted that situation. And if finally, at some point or another, I finally just pulled off the Band-Aid and I courageously said, this no longer works for me. And as you start saying no, and yes, it takes courage. I love the quote from Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss said that a person's success in life can often be measured by the uncomfortable conversations they are willing to have. As you start saying no to things that you no longer resonate with, situations, it could be a behavior. It could be how you spend your time. Think about it. If you are scrolling through Facebook for hours a day, then that's what you're buying. You're always buying something. You're always saying yes to something. You're always placing your attention on something. You're always choosing something. The point, if you're an agency-focused being, is that you start saying yes to better and better things, and you start saying no to things that you used to accept. And so as a simple strategy that Dan Sullivan recommends, look back on and write down all of the big rejections you've made. It could be an idea. It could be a situation. It could have been a job. It could be a relationship. Write down all of the things that you rejected in the past that ultimately led you to making a big upgrade in your life, and that ultimately led you to getting to where you're at. Now then project forward to your future self and think, what are the things that you're still saying yes to right now that your future self would say no to? What are the things that your future self would reject that you're still accepting? And as you start thinking about that, you can then start to visualize and imagine better things that you can start saying yes to, better things that you can start being the buyer of. In every case, you're always the buyer. If you choose one thing, you're simultaneously not choosing other things. Saying no becomes very powerful and important. One of the things that Greg McKeown talks about in the book Essentialism is that as a person becomes more successful, they start inviting more and more opportunity. They start first off becoming aware of more opportunity, but they also start having more opportunity. It was concentration that got them to success, but now that they're at a higher peak, now they have more opportunity coming at them, and now they're more distracted. They're thinking about what to do with their money. They're thinking about this opportunity, this situation, that situation. And because they're thinking about all of these things, now they're so split focused and they're not doing the things that ultimately got them success. They're no longer concentrating. They're overly diversified, overspread thin in their mind, that then they self-sabotage and they ultimately go backwards and create unnecessary valleys. So it becomes insanely important to clarify what you want at each stage. It's okay that your current self wants different things than your former self. That's actually why you can say no to things. That's why you can reject things, is because now you know better and you want better things than maybe you wanted in the past. Now you want better things, you're clear on what you want, and so you can say no. So as you grow, as you advance, as you succeed, the point is to continuously clarify what you want at each new stage and then to say no to everything else. That doesn't mean you have to abandon everything. There's certain things I'm never going to abandon. For example, my relationship with my wife and various other things. But there's plenty of other things that I'm currently accepting that I know my future self will reject. That could be relationships. It could be situations. It could be habits. So the sooner I can start asking myself, what does my future self say no to that I'm still saying yes to? And how can I start saying yes to those things that my future self would say yes to? Then I can start being a better buyer. Then I can start making better decisions. Then I can start having more courage. It takes courage to say no. It also takes courage to say yes to powerful things and to commit to those powerful things. So that is just a brief book review. It's actually a small book, but there's a lot of density. Again, the link down below to the Amazon where you can buy the book, or the link to the Strategic Coach website where you can download Always Be the Buyer. Such a beautiful book, a great book. I challenge you and invite you to be the buyer. I challenge you to download or buy and read that book, and then review your past rejections. Write down in your journal just the things you've rejected in the past that ultimately led to your biggest breakthroughs. As you start saying no to things, you not only demonstrate true learning. For example, if you finally start saying no to a bad habit, then you've finally learned from that and you can stop repeating the same experience over and over. But also as you truly say no to things that your former self used to say yes to, every time you say no to something, you then can further commit to what you really want. One of my favorite quotes, and this is just to end it, is from Robert Brault. Robert Brault said, "We're kept from our goal not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal." So we're kept from our goal not by the obstacles that are in between us. It's actually we're kept from our goal because of clear paths to lesser goals. We're still saying yes to things that are below our vision. We're still accepting the wrong things. Once you start becoming the buyer and rejecting all of those lesser goals, then you can start committing to what you really want. And just by saying no to a lesser goal, by removing a relationship, by removing a situation, by removing a habit, by removing a behavior, by removing something that you used to accept, it could be how much you get paid. It could be how you spend your time. By removing that, you're committing further to your future self, the person you really want to be. Then you can start saying yes to better things. Now, here's how you get what you want very, very quickly. You engage in a process that Joshua Waitzkin calls investment in loss. This is one of the best books ever on becoming a high performer and learning and outgrowing your former self. Ernest Hemingway, the famous novelist, said that superior is not about being better than other people, it's about being superior to your former self. So this book, Joshua Waitzkin, breaks down how to become a high performer. Joshua Waitzkin, just in case you don't know who he is, he was a very high performer as a child. He was a chess prodigy. He became a world champion in chess, and they actually made a movie about his life called In Search of Bobby Fischer. He ended up leaving chess and ended up becoming a world champion in Tai Chi, and then eventually became a champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's someone who learns how to learn very quickly. He essentially applies principles to learning any discipline. One of the core principles that he heavily suggests in his book is what he calls investment in loss. Here's basically how he describes it. When he was first learning Tai Chi and stuff like that, he realized that often the teacher would give them free time to just go and spar, go and practice and train with other people in the class. They'd have free training time. And what Josh realized is that most of these students, they would go and pair themselves with people who were at a similar level than them, a similar or slightly worse skill level than them, because they were training with people at their own level. And if you're training with people at your own level, you're not going to get very good very quickly. You're basically shielding yourself from your own weaknesses. What Josh would do is he would always pair himself with someone 3 or 4 skill levels above him, and he would get the crap kicked out of him. His training was very difficult. There's a great quote that says, the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in war. Well, Josh would just lose over and over and over again, and he found that people who were unwilling to lose would never be able to win long term because they were shielding themselves, they were shielding their ego from their weaknesses, and they were unwilling to invest in loss. If you're willing to invest in loss over and over and over again, you become much more adaptive. You learn and outgrow your weaknesses. So here's an exact quote from Josh's book, and I want you to understand this quote because if you understand it, you're going to learn your lessons quicker. You're going to make your learning greater than your experience, as Dan Sullivan would say, and you're going to skyrocket to your desired future self. Seriously, wherever you want to go, it could be tens of millions of dollars. It could be becoming a professional writer. It could be anything. I learned this myself. I wanted to become a professional writer. Back when I was in the first year of my PhD program, I wanted to become a professional writer. I've now been able to write and publish multiple books. I've got tons more books coming out, and I was able to skyrocket to where I wanted to go because I got very clear on this one principle. And he's talking about the other Tai Chi students in his class. He says, "It seems that many other students were frozen in place, repeating their errors over and over, unable to improve because of the fear of releasing old habits. When Shen, who was their teacher, made suggestions, they would explain their thinking in an attempt to justify themselves. They were locked in a need to be correct. I have long believed that if a student of virtually any discipline could avoid ever repeating the same mistake twice, both technical and psychological, he or she would skyrocket to the top of their field." I love that. He basically said, if a student would basically avoid repeating the same mistake twice, and that's technical mistakes, but also psychological. Technical is like, how you do something. Psychological is how you feel about it, the mindset. If you avoided repeating the same mistakes over and over again, you'd skyrocket to wherever you want to go. And so here's kind of how to get very serious about this. You have to look at yourself objectively, and you can't really do that, but you've got to look at yourself critically and say, I am not who I need to be. My current self is very ignorant. Actually, what's very great about this, Dr. Carol Dweck, she wrote a very powerful, transformative book, Mindset. What she obviously found is that there's a difference between people with a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. People with a fixed mindset overemphasize who they are in the present. They overly care about who they are in the present. So Carol Dweck, she did a lot of research on 10-year-old students, and she gave them math problems, or she gave them some form of problem-solving situation that was way above all of their heads. They couldn't do it. They all failed. And she was basically just trying to see how they responded to the failure. Well, the people who had the fixed mindset, they looked at the failure as catastrophic. They looked at it as a final exam on their own self and their own skills and abilities. Basically what they did is they overly defined themselves as, I can't get any better than this. What Carol Dweck said is they were trapped in the tyranny of now. They were overemphasizing who they were in the present, and they thought that who they were in the present was exactly who they were going to be in the future. They thought whatever skills or abilities they had in the present, they wouldn't be able to outgrow those. That's the fixed mindset. Whereas people with the growth mindset, they didn't really overemphasize their current skills or abilities. They were actually excited by the failure. They framed the failure as, this is happening for me. This is something I can use. And so they then saw a future version of themselves beyond their current limitations. In other words, people with a growth mindset care way more about their future self than their current self. People with a fixed mindset, they overemphasize their current self. They say, this is who I am. They use definitive terms. They say, I'm an introvert, or I'm bad at science, or I'm not very good at this. People with a growth mindset don't really care about who they are right now. Think about, for example, Elon Musk. Elon Musk talks about how he wants to die on Mars. That's his image of his future self. And whatever view you have of your future self, that's the thing driving your present behavior and mindsets. Obviously, Elon Musk hasn't gotten there yet. We haven't learned how to get to Mars. There's so many things that he has to outgrow in his current self that his future self already embodies. And there's a really, really powerful concept in psychology and high-performance psychology called deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is basically how you develop skills. There's naive practice and there's deliberate practice. Naive practice is basically just going out and gaining experience. I can go out and shoot basketballs with my son and I'm gaining experience, but I'm not actually getting better at basketball. You can do something, for example, for 10,000 hours. Malcolm Gladwell popularized the 10,000 hour rule. He said that if you do something for 10,000 hours, you'll become world class. That's a lie. You can do something for 10,000 hours naively and just get a lot of experience but gain no skill. I can go out and do something over and over again and not get any better at it. Deliberate practice means you're actually focusing on developing certain skills. There's something specific you want to achieve. You have to have a certain goal or a certain thing you're wanting to change, and your practice or your activities are targeted towards improving that specific area. There's a lot of research that shows in order to engage in specific deliberate practice, you have to have a clear future self in mind, but then ultimately you have to engage in investment and loss. You've got to be willing to lose over and over and over again to rid yourself of your former weaknesses and mindsets and to ultimately compete at the level. You want to actually compete at the level of your future self. You want to work at and think at and focus on the level of your future self. Now, there's one other thing that I highly recommend, and this makes your life so simple. This goes back to the Kobe Bryant quote. Kobe Bryant said that once he determined what he wanted, the whole world became his classroom. He could use anything and everything he learned to ultimately help him achieve his goal. Well, think about it this way. What if you put your ego in check? A lot of the reasons why, even as Josh Waitzkin said, a lot of the reasons why we repeat the same mistakes over and over again is because of our ego. We want to overly justify our current thinking. Whereas if you're willing to just be wrong, if you're willing to lose, if you're willing to say, I have no clue what I'm doing, if you're willing to say that your current self isn't the be-all end-all, your current self is completely ignorant of how to become your future self. Your current self doesn't know what they're doing. And that's great. That puts you in the student mindset. Then here's what you do. There's a great quote from Darren Hardy. He says, never take advice from someone you wouldn't trade places with. Basically, if you're clear on your goal, and if you're understanding that your current self doesn't really matter that much, your current self is temporary, your future self is going to be much different, and you can outgrow all of the weaknesses of your current self. So you don't really worry about your current self. Once you've determined what you want, then you identify the people who are already there, and you ask them all the questions in the world with no ego. You don't need to try to prove that you're smart. Instead, you want to prove that you're a student. Ask them questions and apply what they learn and become the most voracious question asker. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. You don't need to prove your intelligence. The only thing that matters is your willingness to learn and ask questions and then apply principles of what they teach you. You can ask people questions and you can read books, for example, or you can watch YouTube videos, or you can directly go to the source of mentors. And if you're willing to just put your ego in check, put it completely aside, and not worry about how you feel in the present moment and how you see yourself in the current moment, your current situation and your current self matters so much less than your trajectory and your willingness to learn. And if you're willing to invest in loss, willing to let go of old ways, and kind of like the high hope versus low hope people, if you're willing to adjust and adapt your process, adjust and adapt how you do something, and if you're willing to just ask and apply the people who are already there, you can skyrocket there. You can stop repeating the same mistakes over and over. Lessons are repeated until learned. One of the reasons why people feel like their goals are so far away is because they keep repeating the same errors over and over again. Rather than just directly asking people who are already there how to do it, and then just completely applying it, you could skyrocket to being wherever you want to be. If it's being one of the top writers in the world, you could skyrocket there. If it's being a millionaire, you could skyrocket there. If it's starting a business, you could skyrocket there. It's all about your willingness to invest in failure, your willingness to get the right advice, and your willingness to apply that advice, and your willingness to stop doing the things over and over again. As Einstein said, insanity is repeating the same thing and expecting a different result. You got to be willing to adjust. You got to be willing to stop doing what your current self would do, because your current self is ignorant. Your current self also lacks the capability. But how do you gain confidence? Dan Sullivan said that confidence is built by making progress towards goals above your capabilities. So to kind of sum all this up, Viktor Frankl said that what man needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal. You need a goal. You need a future. If you don't have a view of your future, your present actually becomes meaningless, shallow. It becomes difficult. You can't be present in the moment without a powerful future that's pulling you forward. You need a future. You need clear goals to have flow. And then you need to focus on one outcome at a time to have lots of flow. And you can have flow all the time. I'm in flow right now. All I'm focusing on is one video, even though my future self has filmed 500 videos. I've got a clear future self as it relates to my YouTube channel, but to be in flow, you focus on one outcome at a time. I'm still living in the future. My view of my future is driving my present, but I'm focused on just one outcome at a time. So you focus on one outcome at a time, but it's a freely chosen task, whatever you want. And then you just own the fact that your current self doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter where you're at right now. What matters is your future self. And so then ultimately you get the right advice and you just commit to your future self rather than committing to your current circumstances. That's how you become your chosen future self. That's how you skyrocket past anyone. And one thing that's exciting to know is that most of the people in the world are going to be repeating the same mistakes over and over again. They're going to keep accumulating experience, but not learning from that experience. They're going to be engaging in naive practice, but not deliberate practice. It's your choice. Do you want to skyrocket to the top of your field or your choice of goal, whatever it is? Apply these principles. My name is Dr. Benjamin Hardy. The link down below, you can get access to my free 30-day Future Self course. It's science-packed, and I will see you later. Also, click the link down below and watch my other YouTube videos. See ya.